Everybody coming to you from the boatyard. Dream Chaser is still up on the hard. We are having some more work done on her. Been a little longer than we thought, but it's actually a very reasonable time frame. So we're thrilled, and keep on watching.
So here's where we left you last week. If you remember, Deb was tucked up over the sink and taking the nuts off the bottom side of the stanchions, and I was up top removing hardware. You can kind of see just what an obstacle course and maze it looks like down in the boat right now with the floorboards out. So still a lot of work being done in the bilge, on fuel lines, and we are removing the hardware to make it a little cheaper on labor.
So from the bow, we have most of them already off, and that's been that way for a while. Deb just went ahead and removed the nuts from this particular one here, and unfortunately this one is right behind the electric panel, so I asked her to hold off on that one. She's got the sides of the gate off, and she's working on the secondary side of the gate now, so I'm going to try and break some of these loose up here.
So I started by removing each stanchion from the base itself. It's a bronze base. There's one screw that holds it in place. And once I had all the nuts and bolts out, every once in a while I'll use the actual stanchion, just get a little leverage and break the seal between the deck and the base of the stanchion base. Now I went ahead and pulled it off, and just putting the screws back with them so I don't misplace any of those. So as I was working over on the starboard side, I went ahead and removed the stanchions along the edge of the boarding gate, just trying to keep everything neat, stacking them nice and neat on the deck. And you can see I'm making a second trip with the screws for that particular base, and just sort of repeated this process over and over till all the stanchions and bases were up. But it's getting dark, and it's time to start gathering up the tools here and call it a night for tonight. So I left the camera set up on this side of the boat, and you can kind of see in fast motion this, part of the marina. Boats will come down, do a little circle in, and come back out. But I was working on the other side, and I just noticed this when editing the film. In last week's episode, we talked a little bit about the bronze actual gooseneck track that holds the boom on, and how that worked on the old mast versus what it may look like on the new mast. And you can see we had these parts on a table as we were demonstrating the difference and why we were moving to this inbound bolted one. And over the last couple of days, they've made some real progress in the yard, so I'll show you what this looks like now as of this week.
So if you remember, this is the gooseneck track, and before it had one that was outbound bolts, and this one gets tapped right down through the center, so it's good and strong. Well, that's nice. It works pretty well for us. Obviously I'll have a nice little decorative piece, I think, on the end.
We returned to the boat on Tuesday morning, essentially to do some more work, and I love this fast motion security camera we have down below. It basically creates what they call a day brief, and then I can also grab footage of it. But you start to see just how much moving around is captured as we kind of work throughout the day. Deb is still continuing to remove a few more backing bolts on the backing plates of different deck hardware. So whether that happens to be the stanchion bases, or there's some places where we have some small blocks that attach to the deck for the jib sheets, as well as some of the deck fills. There's 3 diesel tanks, 2 water tanks, a waste pump out, so we have quite a few deck fill openings as well in the boat. I found this piece of footage from a few days earlier, and this is when I was getting a secondary air card connected for the capturing of this kind of video and putting it up on the cloud. But I saw this funny video in fast motion of my daughter bent over right there. I thought, what in the heck is she doing? Turns out she just had to use the restroom, but had to bend over and take a moment to just kind of hold it in.
Hey guys. So today, with the boat being out of the water, we went ahead and had a survey guy come out and redo the boat, the survey on the bottom, mainly for insurance purposes, because we are going to need that that is one of the things our insurance said they needed since the date of ours is so old. So he came out today and did the survey, so you'll see a little bit of that here in a minute.
And they are actively sanding on the bottom, so they're thinking that they're going to sand and prep the bottom today, paint it early next week, and potentially launch us into the water on Wednesday. Now,
Tuesday or Wednesday is the launch, but they're looking at.
So that sounds great, and we think, wouldn't that be great? We'll be able to sail home. But what that means is the deck is closer to the height of the dock, making it much easier for them to step on and off for all the other work we're having done.
Yep.
So we'll get a little bit of footage of this here too.
I'd like to introduce you to Charlie Hazori. He's with Jones Marine Surveying. We used him for the original survey when we bought the boat 3 years ago. As Deb started to mention in the earlier cut, we decided to have him come out not just to do a survey on the bottom of the boat, but honestly to redo the entire survey. We were looking for an insurance survey that would be updated, showing the work we've done to the boat in the last several years. This was going to do a couple of things for us. It would reestablish the value of the boat, as well as allow us to have a more recent one showing that there are no issues with the bottom side of the boat. And some of the things that he'd noted on the original survey was to have the bottom painted. So by having a survey stating that that's already done, we expect that will help us out to essentially lower our insurance rates and show that we are doing some of the work that would make improvements to the boat. Oh, forgive us, but it seems like we left the sound off for the first part of this video. What Charlie's showing us right here is where it looks like this rudder had been repaired at some point in the past, and he's just noting that the repair looked really good. It didn't have any issues, no water intrusion, and it looked like a good solid repair job. So what Charlie's checking right here is actually the angle of each individual blade to see if any of the blades are slightly out of alignment. And as it turns out, one of ours is slightly out of alignment. And he's suggesting that a displacement hull is probably not a big deal with a planing hull boat and a much faster spinning propeller. It could be an issue, but since we have the boat out of the water, we will go ahead and have the prop reconditioned. I remember years ago, the first time I saw a surveyor do this, pull out a hammer and start hammering at the bottom of the boat. I thought the guy had lost his mind. This is called sounding the hull, and there's a special kind of hammer. What they're listening for is a change in the pitch that would indicate either a hollow layer between the layers of fiberglass, which would indicate delamination, where the multiple layers of fiberglass had separated from one another, potentially causing an issue or a weak spot. And in a moment here, it looks like we realized the sound was off. We turned it back on, and you'll hear what that sounds like when we do the sounding. We just remembered that when we did this last time, we found a hollow spot in the keel. As it turns out, there used to be a tank down there at some point in the boat's history. I recommend getting a marine surveyor. The information they share is really helpful. In this case, he was explaining to me the difference between the benefits of actually sanding all the way down to a barrier coat or to glass and adding a barrier coat and then putting new bottom paint on it versus bottom paint on top of another layer of bottom paint. And it's not that you can't do either one of those two different treatments, but he was explaining what the differences are. And in our case, we decided not to go all the way down to barrier coat, to have the yard essentially do what they recommended, which was sand it smooth and then ultimately put another layer of paint on it. And here what he was showing me is just around where the new through holes were in here. He was saying, that one of the things the yard will likely do here is they'll sand down or grind down any of that sealant before they do the paint on it, because that sealant will keep the paint from adhering well. And here's where we were looking at that repair done on the rudder, and I was asking Charlie to sort of check it out real well, and you can see he's sounding all throughout the rudder to make sure that it's solid and that the repair job done at some point in this boat's history was a good one, and there wasn't any lamination or delamination of the fiberglass against the inner material of this particular rudder. Good for us. Everything looks real good here. So while we were back here, I took the opportunity to ask Charlie about the grounding system here and how the anodes were connected to the gudgeons. In our case, we have the anode, and then we have a series of ground straps that go to the different metal materials. And he was saying that essentially you judge a boat based on the way they were built at that particular point in history, and that would be just fine. It's adequately protecting all of the metal here on the boat. Newer boat design would actually have an anode on each piece of that metal. I gotta say, to the boatyard's credit, you can kind of see this is where they had left off when we got there, but Charlie actually beat us to the yard, and to the yard's credit, they would not let him do an inspection on the boat until we were there as the owners of the boat. And I just thought that was classy and sort of the right thing to do of Myers Yacht Service. I really am a fan of that organization. They are really good. But you can see here, once I got there, we got right to it and started going through all this survey. We wrapped up this part of the survey just in about 20 minutes or so, just to look at the bottom while it's out of the water. But the boatyard was really hoping to finish sanding the boat and start to put the actual bottom paint on today, so they got right to it. Well, we went ahead and got some breakfast, and we came back a couple of hours later to check on the boat, and they had really made some pretty good progress on sanding it down. You can see the black stripe above the waterline, but you can also see where they got the first set of sanding done, and back here you can see where they have the second set done. I would not say it's all the way down to barrier coat. That wasn't the plan or goal, but they definitely sanded it down pretty far. I was surprised at just how far down they went through this. You can tell it was multiple layers of old bottom paint that had been in place. So to me it looked really good, and I kept feeling it, making sure that it felt smooth, right? And there wasn't noticeable raises and gaps from the old layers to the new layers of it. And just like Charlie had pointed out, you can see where around that new through hull they did sand the 5200 sealant or whatever kind of sealant they used, so that there would be no problem with the bottom paint actually adhering to it. So you can see the different colors of bottom paint that were originally on here. When I rubbed my hands along this, aside the fact that my hands certainly turned bright red, it certainly was in good shape, and even sanded the rudder and all around the gudgeons and pintles. So it looks good. Looks like it's ready to go in preparation for the bottom paint. I just went ahead and stepped back here and got the footage. It's kind of the first footage most of you are seeing of the stern here, and then down the other side where they have it partially sanded on the bottom at this point. And now back over to the mast work. I showed this in the last video. They marked the mast on where the center of the winches are going to be, and what that means is that they need to create an aluminum reinforcement plate where the winch will actually mount. And right next to Myers Yacht Service is Nick's Aluminum and Stainless Shop, and they do a lot of this type of fabrication work. So Myers essentially is subcontracting with them to create some of the components that we're going to need. And here he's cutting the aluminum plates that will be welded to the aluminum mast and will be the base for the winches to mount to. I had decided I was going to spend as much time as I could at the yard sanding the tow rails and really take advantage of the scaffolding being up, as we mentioned in an earlier video. The fact that they were going to be painting the boat this weekend sort of had me concerned. They were painting the bottom. So I talked to the painters that were there doing the work, and they said, I'm fine. I can still sand up top, even though they're doing the bottom paint below the waterline. It's not like a top coat paint where you're trying to get a mirror finish, so it's not going to cause it any harm. So that let me continue to do the work here. And you'll notice what I'm doing is I'm standing on the scaffolding. I'm just using my small palm orbital sander, and I have a small paint scraper or paint trim piece. It's essentially a plastic scraper, and it's normally used in a house to put up against the wall right along the edge of the trim, so as you paint the trim you don't actually get any paint on the wall itself. What I found is it's a great little guard to keep me from hitting the sander into the sides of the hull. So I put it right up against the hull, and then I can bounce the sander up along that without a concern for scratching the hull at all. This was a fairly slow process, and it took the longest on the bottom side of this tow rail, where I was being extremely cautious that I didn't scratch my fresh new paint here. But I started along the bottom and just slowly arched my way around, and I was only going to the outer edge, and then I figured I could do the rest of it from the top of the deck. It would be much easier. Once I would do about a 10-foot section or so with 150 grit, I would then go ahead and switch to the 220 or 240 grit, and I would go back over the outer edge again before kind of moving on to the rest of the boat. I just wanted to get little sections done at a time, so that's the way I chose to do this. And then, of course, I went to do this, and all of a sudden the paper wouldn't stick to the sander anymore. I had to run to the store and buy a new base. So with the new part, it was time to kind of make some more progress here. And what I did was I would tear the paper down, but I wasn't pulling it completely off of the boat. I was hoping I could still use that to sort of protect some of the sawdust from going on the new paint, and even use it as a way to prevent potentially bumping or scratching it. So you'll notice I'm not ripping it all off here. I'm really just trying to cut it about 2 or 3 inches below the tow rail, and in some cases I sort of just folded it back over itself to help remain in place and protect. Maybe that was a fool's errand, but that's what I did. I used it to help provide a little more assurances to protect the hull itself. And you guys have all seen sanding, so I'll give you a few hours worth of this in a matter of seconds. And you can see the process. I would go through the whole thing at 150 grit, changing paper frequently, using the scraper to protect the surface. And then once I did that, I would switch to the 220 or 240 and kind of repeat the process for that section. And then when it came to the wide section of tow rail where there's a ledge on it, I went ahead and broke out the big guns. I used the air-controlled compressor one along with the vacuum hose to capture some of the sawdust. This is a slightly larger diameter and sort of made much faster progress of this. So where I could use this, I did. I just had a limited number of the bigger pads. So I used this in places where I had a little more area to cover, or it was going to be a little harder area to sand down to bare wood.
Saturday, I've been in the yard all day. I got here about 8:30 or so this morning and have been sanding for almost the whole day. I did have a problem with my sander. I had to run over to Home Depot and buy a new backing pad for it. But yeah, made some pretty good progress. I'll show you what it looks like on the tow rail. Essentially, I've got 3/4 of the port side of the boat done. Still need to do the starboard side. So this is a slow process. I'll probably be here all day again tomorrow. And I was hoping to be getting varnish on while this was still up around the scaffolding. That may be a bit of a challenge, but I'm going to see if there's any way I can.
I used the air sander again on the top of this rail, and then switched the whole party over to the starboard side and continued the work. Long process, but progress made.
Yeah, we went ahead and put some bottom paint on today. Let me show you what it looks like. The masking can come off any time. I've been pulling off just enough to sand the tow rail on the other side. Still have this side to go. So it takes quite a bit to get all that old varnish and epoxy off.
You know, the long flat sections are kind of the easy sections. Where this got a little bit challenging was because this is a boat made in Taiwan, one of the signature looks on a Taiwanese boat is the wood and scroll work. So there's this beautiful decorative teak scroll work, but getting sanded all down inside of those nooks and crannies takes quite a bit of effort and time. Even a little bit of hand sanding and hand filing and scraping needed to be done here as well. I still haven't tackled how I'm going to do the lathe turned spindles that are between the raised cap rail and the tow rail all the way across the back end of the boat, but we made great progress here.
It's sanded all the way up there to the bowsprit.
And then it was the day, splash day.
All right. Dream Chaser. Captain Ron. Woohoo, Gil!
So that was Kurt you just heard. Kurt is one of the guys that works at Myers Yacht Service Yard, and he's been tremendous to work with. A really friendly guy. Every time I'm up there, he comes over and chit-chats a little bit. wonderful guy, and I was really thankful. We were not able to be there the day the boat was going into the water, and we wanted to. We'd actually said we wanted to come film it, and Kurt took the time to go kind of stand out on the end of their dock and ask his coworkers to kind of man the lines and whatnot so he could get that filmed for us. And I really appreciate it. That was awesome that he did it. I'll show you a couple of the other videos he has here. One of it going down into the water, and then the other one is they're sort of walking it back along the dock there.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Forgive me, I had a problem with my cell phone. I ended up losing some footage. I had some footage of the propeller being reconditioned and a few other things. Unfortunately, I don't have those, and it's just too late. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Next week, I'll actually show a little bit more work of the mast being done, some of the fabrication work going on there, and just a little bit about what it's like living when we were initially planning on going from Dream Chaser as our liveaboard onto our 43-foot Gulfstar last affair. That's been a challenge. We'll share some of the details with you in next week's video. Thanks, y'all. Really do appreciate it. Give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hope you like it. Bye now. Hey everybody, thanks for watching, and please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or even Tumblr. Please take a moment and go over to our website at svdreamchaser.com to download free resources for cruising and how-to projects. Get your thumbs and mouses ready. We also have a couple of links right on the screen for some other playlists and videos that we think you'll enjoy. Thanks for watching, fellow dreamers.